Welcome back. Joining me now is Robert Maguire. He's a research director for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, also known as CREW. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. Doing well.
The pleasure is ours. I follow the work of Crew on a regular basis. I follow them on social media, and you all seem to always be in the mix of some of the most critical fights as it pertains to justice, as it pertains to ethics in Washington, D.C. Could you just really quickly give the audience a snapshot of what it is that Crew does?
Sure. So CREW is a nonpartisan, nonprofit watchdog organization that uses investigations, policy advocacy, and legal actions to push for a more equitable, just, accountable, and open government. So we're filing FOIAs to get information for the public. We're pushing for better laws that allow the public to get the information that they need, and we're calling out elected officials who are acting in an unethical fashion.
So wherever you see unethical behavior, regardless of political party, you address it.
Absolutely.
Let's start with something I've seen you all cover, January 6th. And one of the things that we hear about the narrative of January 6th, or one of the subtext of some of the conversations, is that even the investigation into it is itself partisan. But I've seen Crew, I've seen your organization, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. I've seen you all address it head on. What is the perspective of your organization and your work in particular around January 6th, but also as it pertains to you being a nonpartisan organization and the smoke and mirrors of trying to reduce what happened on January 6th to mere politics versus some structural or ethical issues?
Sure, absolutely. The first thing I would say is that there's nothing partisan about wanting to know everything that we can possibly know about an attack on one of the most sacred spaces in our democracy. This was both an attack on the physical space there and an attack on our democracy, and that they were trying to overthrow a democratic election. And so to the extent that there is one party right now whose elected officials are to a large extent beholden to the person that sort of was the ringleader in bringing about this attack on the Capitol. Americans by and large can see that it is important, it is critical for us to get the answers of what happened and to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. And so there's nothing, we are not doing it because adherence to a Republican president attacked the Capitol. We're doing it because an angry mob attacked the Capitol. It doesn't matter who they were supporting. It matters that they were trying to overthrow a free and fair election. The Department of Homeland Security said was the freest, fairest, and most secure election in American history.
So what are the findings of your research over there at Crew as it pertains specifically to January 6th? Where is the breakdown in ethics, in who needs to be held responsible? And because we discuss this a lot in the media, and it's really easy for us to point to Trumpism, the Donald Trump supporters, or the thin blue line, or all the other components. But where have your freedom of information requests and all of your research, where has it pointed your focus in terms of what happened on January 6th? Help us to understand what happened.
Sure. So as soon as, the dust settled after the attack, we realized we needed to gather as much information as we possibly could. So, we set about filing FOIAs, some of which are going to take a while. I mean, some of this is a long process, but we have already found that the Secret Service, for example, was downplaying the prospect of violence that day. We have found that there were warnings internally at various departments that this kind of violence was likely. And so this kind of thing is starting to sort out, and we're starting to see that there was a reticence on the part of those who should have been protecting the Capitol to actually ramp up defenses. The other thing that we've done is we've filed criminal complaints against President Trump, against Mark Meadows, his chief of staff at the time, against Assistant Attorney General, who was also pushing the big lie, trying to help President Trump overthrow the election. And so we're trying to get those investigations started at the FBI and Department of Justice. And then lastly, we are tracking corporate contributions to the Sedition Caucus. This is the 147 members of Congress who voted not to certify the election. And the reason that we're doing that is that, unfortunately, one of the most powerful industry or sectors or political groups, I should say, in Washington are corporations. They give the most money. They have a lot of power, and unfortunately, that's the way our system is set up. And as soon as the days after January 6th, we started seeing companies say, "We're not going to give money to these 147 members who voted not to certify the election." And we knew that if somebody wasn't there to track this, that those companies were going to start quietly giving again. And we were going to let that happen. We were going to say, if you're going to give, you're going to be called out for it.
I have to interrupt you there because I did not see that turn coming, but I should have. You mean to tell me that in the wake of January 6th, all of the corporations that said that they were no longer going to give money to these particular Congress people and senators, would you call them the Sedition Caucus? I think that's a brilliant way of phrasing it. They said they were never going to give money to these people again, and you mean some of them have already started, and it hasn't even been 10 months yet.
Yes, absolutely. Some of them had started giving just weeks after the insurrection. And some of these are household names. I mean, Toyota has given to dozens of members of the Sedition Caucus. We're talking Boeing, General Motors, a number of companies that are household names. And I should say we have a tracker up on our website that is updated every single day showing these companies. And it's sort of a doubly useful tool for us because it also illustrates the fact that these corporations are beholden to members of Congress. Even after an attack on our democracy, they feel that they have to keep giving money to members of Congress who sit on certain committees because that's how they get a seat at the table. And this is sort of the core issue of the way that money in politics works in America, is that if you have enough money to give large campaign contributions, you have enough money to get a seat at the table. And, the old saying goes that if you don't have a seat at the table, then that means you're on the menu, and the rest of us are on the menu. And so that's why this project is so important, is that it allows us to, on the one hand, try to exert some sort of accountability, but on the other, to illustrate the sort of the pernicious, corrupting way that money in politics works in America.
Wow. I just think that writers from the past, philosophers, great literary giants, would laugh at how easily they could write the tragedy of the American empire being bought and sold by the highest bidder, because it is kind of Shakespearean how ridiculous our country has been. I'm looking at, I went to your website. You said the tracker was up there. I'm already on your website. And here's a graphic that I want to read to the audience so that they can have an idea of what's happening, and especially what you all do over at Crew. Total corporate and industry spending on Sedition Caucus members, $10,459,971 in corporate or industry money has been given to Sedition Caucus members or committees and allied committees. And then 467 corporations and industry groups, political action committees have given to Sedition Caucus members. And 138, this was the one, 138 of the 147 members of the Sedition Caucus have reported receiving corporate or industry money since January 6, 2021. So basically, whereas I always assumed that these corporations held all of the control because of the money that they've given, you're saying it's also reciprocal. The relationship of control is also kind of reciprocal in the sense that they are now beholden to these politicians as well.
Right. It certainly it goes both ways. You know, so the companies feel that they have to give this money, and on the flip sides, members of Congress, there are certain members of Congress who get half or even up to 75%, 80, 90% of their money from corporate PACs. You know, there was a member at one point who, as more and more companies started making commitments not to give, he threatened to make an enemies list, basically saying, right. It's sort of, you know, saying the quiet part out loud that, you know, your corporate contributions get you in the door with my office and my people. And if you're going to make a pledge not to give, then you're going to be on my enemies list and you're not going to get in the door. You know, that there's always been this sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge that, no, of course, these corporate contributions don't influence me in any way. When, you know, you have instances like this where the members are essentially saying out loud, yeah, that's what gets you in the door. And if you're not going to do it, you're going to be on my enemies list.
Wow. I'm looking at this list, and thank you to you and the team over at Crew. I would not have known that Google, Alphabet, is part of this group of corporations that have given post January 6th. You have Boeing, Koch Industries. Obviously, I would definitely expect the Koch brothers, or the industries rather, to be a part of this. Lockheed Martin, the military industrial complex. You mentioned Toyota, General Motors, Walmart. I mean, everything. UPS. Aflac, as adorable as their commercials are, they're in this group too. Man, what do we do? What is the approach here? Because what we see around us is almost a consolidation around the very path that is necessary to destroy humanity. But we're set on that path pretty convincingly. Like we're literally headed towards disaster when you think about climate change, when you think about COVID-19, and you think about the insurrection and terrorist event of January 6th. What do we do when some of the top players in our society, Google, Alphabet, Aflac, all these, they are on the wrong side of this particular issue? And of course, we know that they, you know, some corporations want to keep things the way they are. My question is, in your thinking, in your research over there, Crew, when you guys put your heads together, how do we survive this natural propensity to catapult humanity to destruction when we're fighting against like major corporations and the rulers of our country?
So it's not an easy fight. That is for sure. But what I would say is that, you know, one, I would point to something else that's on the tracker, that despite the companies that have given, some of whom pledged not to give and gave anyway, there are a lot who are keeping their pledge. So there's that. There are a lot of companies that are not giving. Some companies even shut down their PACs entirely. So there is good news there. The other is, I would point out, you know, as polarized as we are as a country right now, one thing we agree on is the fact that there needs to be more regulation of money in politics. This is Republicans, Democrats, once you get outside of Washington. So the problem is the fact that it's polarized in Washington. It's in the halls of Congress that this is a partisan issue. And so if we can harness some of that bipartisanship that's outside of Washington to say, we're fed up with this. We are done with this outsized influence of corporate entities that, you know, exist solely for the purposes of benefiting their shareholders. We want to limit their influence in the system. Then we can start to make changes, and there are plenty of good changes that could be made to the campaign finance system. There are bills out right now that are being discussed that could help increase the voice of regular Americans and rein in the power and influence of corporations.
Robert, we're already out of time, and I wanted to talk about at least two more subjects with you. Hopefully, we can have you back. But thank you for drawing those connecting strands and the dots between January 6th and corporate money in our politics, because I had not considered that that was going on right underneath our noses. Robert Maguire, Research Director, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.